Once upon a time. On fields of prim and proper privilege, a people's game was bound in laws, and a silver cup was cast for gentlemen. But in factory towns beneath smoky skies, men with calloused hands and muddy boots dared to dream that this could be their fairy tale, and with Olympic toil they made the cup their own. When the war drums beat, the story changed. Fields stood silent, factories left still, and so Britain's daughters laced their boots, filling the void, filling seats as well. They danced in bonnets and heavy boots, thrilling crowds and gathering charity gold, but big bad men with suits and champagne flutes sent them off to 50 winters out in the cold. With daughters sidelined, sons arose. Under Wembley towers, bluebirds sang. Wizards weaved, saints and black cats soared, and cannons roared a 14-gun salute. The fairy tale dreams lived on for the sons, because for every cobbler bested, there were lily-white screamers and amber invasions, spy-rites in dreamland, and unstoppable imps. Dark days too, pain, death, and blame, and never-ending fights for justice. The people together reminding the big bad men to never forget who this game belongs to. Slowly and surely the daughters built back. No white knight needed to save this story. Just lioness roars, a century in the making. Tens of thousands once more crowning queens in glory. Now under equal blue skies the final calls to all. Peasants, princesses, dreamers and giant slayers. For in this fabled land of football fairy tale, no result is beyond imagination. This is the Sporting Almanac Podcast.
Afternoon, Jack.
Afternoon, Ben. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I am buzzing for this week's episode. I'm not going to lie to you. This is our first love, boyhood dreams, our wheelhouse, your wheelhouse specifically in terms of the history of it all. But yeah, this is one of the great sporting weeks.
For all the criticism about the competition's not like what it used to be, it's lost its importance, or whatever else people say.
Nonsense.
As a kid, if I was dreaming about football, I was dreaming about lifting the FA Cup at Wembley, getting given the FA Cup and lifting it.
Yeah, mate, like the FA Cup, that's where we are. If anybody hasn't already read between the lines, we're going to Wembley, the famous Wembley, the Arch. What was the Towers previously, but now the Arch. Objectively a great sporting weekend, and subjectively for us, still a great sporting weekend. Our favourite, arguably.
Well, we'll see. We'll see on Saturday evening how great it is. Could be very great.
Could be very, very great. Should we start there? Should we start with with this year's FA Cup, just to put it into context?
Yeah. So this year's FA Cup final is on Saturday. I believe it's a 4:30 kickoff, although they can't bloody make their minds up what time it kicks off.
Yeah, keep changing.
But it's Crystal Palace versus Manchester City. All the neutrals are supporting Crystal Palace.
To
anyone
a man.
who's a Man City fan will probably be supporting Man City, as you'd expect, but we'll forgive them for that this weekend. But I like an underdog reaching the final. I say an underdog. Palace are a well-established Premier League team. They're a good team. They're solidly mid-table, but they've never won anything.
Nope. Never won anything. So when we say underdog, let's put that into proper context for people. Crystal Palace Football Club have never won any trophies, ever. And they are in the final of the FA Cup.
There's been no trophy worth winning in world football that Manchester City haven't won in the past 5 years, let alone in the rest of their history.
And they've done it in such a romantic way. Bankrolled
rags to riches.
By a Middle Eastern state. It's just what football was made for.
Sarcasm.
Yeah. Well, it's very apt, actually, that is the matchup for this FA Cup final, in my opinion. and probably yours too, because it really is kind of exactly what makes everybody fall in love with the FA Cup, because it is synonymous with giant killings and things like that, underdog stories, and we're going to talk about some of them. And Palace,
all the way to the final,
yeah, exactly, and Palace going up against like a team that's never won anything before, that has a proud history, is a well-established Premier League club now, has some very good players in its own right, but a club that's never won anything in its history going up against a superpower that's been bankrolled to all the success it could possibly wish for in the last 10 years.
Yeah, won 2 FA Cups in that time as well, and that's probably the competition it's been least successful in, relatively speaking, other than Champions League, which they've only won once, but apart from that, four Premier Leagues in a row until this season.
Yeah.
They are a dominant force in English football, and Crystal Palace are the plucky underdogs in this case. Although they've got some very good players. So I'm looking forward to it. It'll be good.
Yeah, it will be very good. And the Women's FA Cup final the following day.
Yeah. The Women's FA Cup final is on Sunday, and that is Chelsea versus Manchester United, and that is at 1:30 on Sunday.
Yeah,
for some reason.
And not a dissimilar matchup. I mean, Manchester United are a huge footballing institution on the men's side of things. They have a good women's team, but not a great women's team. And Chelsea are a women's juggernaut.
Yes, I mean, it's not quite the same because Manchester United are also the defending champions. But Chelsea have won multiple FA Cups. I need to get my stats out, really, but they've won. I think they won 3 in a row recently. So, yeah, they are the
Chelsea
single dominant
conquering.
force.
Yeah, Chelsea are all conquering at the moment. And Man United are good. That's the thing. They are good, but they are certainly going into this as the underdogs, even if they are the holding favourite.
All we're saying is, if you're neutral in picking a team, though, it wouldn't always be something we'd encourage. Supporting Manchester United, I think, is okay this year. Just as it was when they were playing Man City last year, and I kept telling myself that over and over.
Yeah.
But yeah, Chelsea won 3 in a row, and Manchester United won last season. So these two teams in particular have both, at least one of them, have been in the past 4 finals, and Chelsea-Manchester United was in fact the final 2 years ago as well. Chelsea being successful on that day. So either way, be a good game.
It will be. And it's cool that they're being played on the same weekend. It hasn't always been the case.
Very much not.
Yeah.
As I'll get into, like, the Women's FA Cup's only been at Wembley for not too many years. I think I want to say 2015 was the first one. Yep, which unsurprisingly Chelsea won. As I'll also get into, the attendances they're really starting to match the men's final attendances now. There was 76,000 there last year, 77,000 there the year before. It's massive attendances in terms of women's club football.
Yeah, it's cool. It's definitely growing exponentially, and long may that continue. Right, I mean, I guess the challenge for this episode, Jack, is going to be transmitting our enthusiasm for this tournament, this event, to anyone who cares to listen. Because
without going to 2 hours again.
Yeah, exactly. And this is obviously a subject that me and you are a bit more familiar with compared to, say, our ice hockey episode, or even some of the horse racing ones. So I think the best place to start is at the beginning, as usual.
In the beginning.
And you take the lead on this because you are our FA Cup historian, and you can probably do this more succinctly than I can, and with more panache and knowledge.
I mean, you're setting me up for a fall there, but I'll do my best. So
Go ahead.
I won't go through all the history of football, but in the beginning there was football played as a popular sport by the masses, largely in the countryside, largely before the Industrial Revolution. You'd have whole villagers chasing a blown up pig's bladder or something, across the entire village. The goalpost will be one street corner on one side, and then maybe a farmhouse or something on the other side. Several miles in between. Very little rules. Probably quite a lot of violence. As happened with many sports, or as happened with a lot of recreation in the 19th century, people lost their recreation time because the Industrial Revolution happened. A lot of people moved to the cities. They were working very long hours, which was gradually pared down. Gradually, they started getting time back. Gradually, half days on Saturday were the norm as opposed to just Sundays. Sundays they always had free, but ball games on Sundays, church weren't into that.
Yeah.
So once those half Saturdays appeared, once hours in the working week were limited, all of a sudden there was a chance for some recreation. But the opportunity had come that those sports which they used to play en masse back in the day had been stratified into some rules, into some codes, and that was done not in the working class streets of Manchester or Preston or Sheffield or anywhere else. It was done as most English invented sports were at the English public schools, at the posh schools, sons of rich folk, codifying these rules, or the masters of the houses codifying these rules, playing the sports in all their certain way. There was loads of different codes of football depending on what school you went to, and eventually these were first codified into a single set of laws in 1848. I've not even got this written down. I'm such a nerd.
Yeah, you are a nerd. This
the
is
Cambridge rules, that was.
This is the thing, isn't it? Like, so the overarching context is the Victorian brothers and sisters, who are famed for quite a few poor segments of our history, did give us a couple of rather wonderful things, and one of them, as you say, is sport. Generally, most sports were codified in the 19th century, and England's first love, football.
Yeah, so they were codified by the public schools, but as I'll come to, they weren't popularised by them. So in 1863, the Football Association founded. Quite a lot of football clubs had already formed, the oldest and most famous of these being Sheffield Football Club, which is the oldest football club on the planet. In the meantime, in order to get a semblance of structure and, more importantly, a sort of control of the laws of the game, the FA was founded. They put out their first laws of the game. People in Sheffield actually disagreed with those original laws. There was already a bit of a north and south divide going on there. But the important thing in terms of this episode is in 1871, one Charles W. Alcock proposed the establishment of the FA Challenge Cup to the Football Association. They accepted, and in November of 1871, the first FA Cup tournament began. 15 teams entered, only 12 teams ended up playing games. It was a bit shambolic at first. They didn't quite get the sort of giving teams a bye rule until a bit later, so you'd end up with essentially everyone would play a first round game, and then if you had an odd number of teams, a couple of teams would get a bye, then everyone would play the next round. It was an odd number of teams. It got to the point teams were getting bye through semi-finals because there was 3 teams left in the semi-final stage. Even more shambolic than that, Queen's Park from Scotland entered the first tournament, and actually
Sacrilege.
some of the first few tournaments until the Scottish FA said to them, "We'd rather you didn't do this. We'd rather you stayed and played here." But Queen's Park actually got to the semi-finals without playing a game because everyone kept getting drawn away to them, and no one could afford to get up to Scotland, up to Glasgow to play them. And then they got drawn against, I want to say, the Wanderers in the semi-finals, and they went and played them, and it was a draw. So then the replay was put on for a few weeks later, and Queen's Park then declined to play that because they couldn't afford it. So they dropped out without having lost a game or conceded a goal after a 0-0 draw. Actually, I think Queen's Park famously, I don't think they conceded a goal in any competitive game for like the first 4 years of their existence or something, and still managed to not win the FA Cup first time round. But I digress. First FA Cup final was on the 16th of March 1872. It was the Wanderers versus the Royal Engineers at Kennington Oval in London.
A very famous cricket ground nowadays.
It is, indeed. And it was 1-0 by the Wanderers, with the winning goal being scored by one Morton Betts of the Wanderers, who was actually playing under the pseudonym A.H. Checker because he was actually a bit of a ringer and he didn't want his real identity given away.
That's so weird.
Yeah, it was very limited, restricted. It was basically a sense of pride or sort of like courtesy, gentlemanliness, shall we say. Because after all, these were all amateur teams. These were all...
I was going to say, it's very Sunday league.
Yeah.
Playing a ringer.
These were teams in the early days largely made up of amateurs, largely made up of former public school players who simply put, did not need to be paid to play the game because they were perfectly wealthy already, either working good, respectable jobs or, more likely, if they've been to the public schools, living off daddy's money. So all was good there for them. So in the early FA Cup was dominated, as I say, by amateur upper-class southern clubs, such as the Old Etonians, who won 3 tournaments in a row in the early days. This changed in the 1880s when, firstly, Blackburn Rovers became the first provincial club and the first, well, I'll get into the professionalism question later, but the first provincial club, shall we say, to reach the FA Cup final in 1882, unsuccessfully. But then Blackburn Olympic reached the FA Cup final in 1883 and played Old Etonians and were the first team from outside of the southern old amateur system to win it, becoming the first northern side to win it in 1883, and was quickly followed up by Blackburn Rovers winning it in 1884, 1885 and 1886. So as you can imagine, the power had somewhat shifted from the south to the north.
That must make Blackburn the only side to have ever won it 3 times in a row.
Other than Old Etonians.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
No one has since.
Yeah, I was going to say. Arsenal,
So they did.
I know for a fact, have made 3 finals in a row, but we haven't won 3 in a row.
No, they were the first team to win 3 in a row. They are the most recent team to win 3 in a row. I do apologise. So they were a side suspected but never proven to contain professionals when they won it for the first time in 1884. And the reason this was controversial is because in 1884, another northern team who was still playing, just like Blackburn Rovers, Preston North End, were expelled from the FA Cup after admitting to paying players. Basically, they got asked, "Are you paying players?" They said yes, but so is everyone else. And they got kicked out, obviously. Blackburn Rovers
Was that
never
the
got proven.
Preston North End Invincibles?
Not quite, but we're nearly there.
Around the same time, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so Preston North End got kicked out. Blackburn managed to get away with it, but in 1885, anyway, things were happening. There was basically amateurism as it was going on. People getting under the table payments, boot money as they called it, money left behind in their boots, or being paid discreetly or given expenses that were far and above what was happening. And the FA obviously was made up of largely ex-public school boys who detested this. We're going to get into this a lot with all different sports. This is an age-old sort of argument in English sport between amateurism and professionalism. Generally speaking, professionalism won out, the exceptions being, in the case of rugby, where the sport split in 2 entirely, and there was a professional version, rugby league, and an amateur version, rugby union, the latter remaining amateur until 1995, which is very impressive. But this is not the case for football.
No.
Association football, I should say, because rugby is, of course, rugby football, having originated at rugby school.
Neither of which are called soccer.
Neither of which are, generally speaking, called soccer. But anyway, so, as I said, Blackburn Rovers winning 3 in a row, and by the time they won their 3rd, professionalism had been legalised, albeit reluctantly by the FA, who could see where the tide was turning. So in 1888, the great Preston North End team reached the final. They were undefeated in 42 matches, having beaten Hyde 26-0 in one of the rounds. And they had the gall to ask for a photo with the trophy before the final, to which the referee responded, "Hadn't you better win it first?" West Bromwich Albion won that game 2-1.
Yes.
But Preston lost,
I
which
love
you love
that.
to see.
I love that.
However,
the beauty of the cup, that's exactly what this tournament is all about, humbling people.
Their first loss in 42 games and off their pedestal. However, 1888, 1889 was the first year of the Football League, so the first year of what was then Division 1, which is what you would now call the Premier League. And Preston North End did, in fact, win that, and they won the FA Cup that season as well, becoming the first team to win the FA Cup double, which is something we might get into again, which is when you win the league and the FA Cup in the same season as Arsenal have before, as Liverpool have before.
It's a coveted domestic title, isn't it, basically?
Yeah, it's relatively rare. I think Man City were obviously the last team to do it, along with the Champions League as well that season, but doesn't happen too often. So from there, generally speaking, the good thing about the FA Cup is, other than small things such as how they do the buys and actually learning how to draw a tournament properly, and replays have lessened and lessened over the years. In the beginning, if you drew a game, it would always be a replay, and it would go on. If you drew again, 2nd replay, 3rd replay. If you drew a final, it would go to a replay, and several finals have. I think the first one was 1970, and a couple more since then. I want to say most recently, did Arsenal go to a replay in 93?
93, we beat Sheffield Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did the domestic cup double that year, just if anyone cares.
Yeah, so the first thing that... just mention it, that's the FA Cup and the League Cup in the same season. Well done, Arsenal.
It's a long time ago,
so
it's not much of a brag. No, I was actually going to say this. I've had the privilege of watching Arsenal win I think it's 7 or 8 of their FA Cups, and I was alive for that one. But I don't actually have a memory of that because I was only 5.
Yeah.
My first memory is 98 Cup double, League and FA Cup double. Nicolas Anelka and Mark Overmars beat Newcastle 2-0.
Yes, I remember that one too. In fact, I probably watched it with you.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, good times. So, as I say, the tournaments largely stayed the same. Replays started to go. I think immediately after that, they got rid of replays in the finals. So finals went to extra time and penalties. Then they got rid of replays in the semi-finals. I think 1999 was the last semi-final to go to a replay. That was, you probably don't want me to mention it, Ben, but that was Ryan Giggs' wonder goal in the replay to win it.
Yes.
Stop
talking about
Manchester
that.
United. Yeah, good goal though.
It was a good goal.
And a horrible person, but a good goal. Then it went from the quarterfinal shortly after that, and now it's at the point where there simply aren't any replays anymore. There's just extra time and penalties, which is sad, if you ask me.
That's only because of like the elite end of the game as well. It's just scheduling and the number of games that the best teams have to play. That's there's no reason to have got. I mean, the irony being that the lower leagues, or at least the lower professional leagues, certainly probably play more domestic league games, but don't play as many games because of European tournaments and things like that. So
and not advancing as far in cups generally.
Yeah, and then obviously you have also the international game and so on and so forth. It's a real shame because it's one of the romances of the tournament historically, isn't it? It's like you go away to a team that you. Well, actually, it probably works better the other way around. You'd be at home against someone, some superpower, and then you would snaffle a draw and get an away day where you get to go and play in like a Premier League stadium, and you're in a lower league team, and big payday as well for the clubs.
Yeah, obviously everyone at the club's happy. Your players get to go and play at Old Trafford or the Emirates or Anfield, some giant stadium you've been watching as a kid. The owners are happy because you also get a portion of the gate receipts as well in the cup.
You get 25%, don't you? I think cup games deliberately give you way more allocation.
Which for a non-league team or for a lower league team would pay the wages for a whole year. 25% of somewhere like Old Trafford's gate receipts when they've got 76,000 people in. That'll keep you going.
That will keep you going. Can I quickly add as well, Jack? Well, so because you got us to professionalism, I think like before we go on any further, I think the thing for anyone who's not initiated to the FA Cup that they need to appreciate and understand to really to grasp its romance is the professional game is only the tip of the iceberg in English football. So if you're a member club of the FA, there is theoretically a route from whatever league you're in through to the Premier League because it's called the footballing pyramid. So you only have 4 professional leagues. Then you have effectively a semi-professional league, which is progressively becoming
mostly professional.
Becoming more professional, which is the National League or old school conference. But thereafter, the league system splits into effectively north and south, and then it pyramids out exponentially to county level. Yeah,
it evenly pyramids out now, which is something I've been reading into recently. It's at level 1 of non-league, so the National League, it's 1 division. Then it's 2 divisions. Then it's 4 divisions. Then it's 8 divisions. So, theoretically, from level 10, level 10 of the football league. So that's level 6 of the non-league.
Mm-hmm.
You can get promoted all the way from there. 10 seasons in a row.
Yeah,
you could theoretically end up in the Premier League, and you can enter the FA Cup as well. Although level 10 teams don't necessarily get in it. Level 9 and above are guaranteed a place. Level 10 only get a place if a level 9 team cannot compete. For whatever reason.
But the point is that
there's a waiting list, basically.
Yeah, if you're in the football pyramid, then you can theoretically get to the FA Cup final. You can play anyone in the Football League pyramid. And you can get, in an ideal set of circumstances, from the bottom to the top. And a contemporaneous example of that, in sort of semi-terms, is Wrexham. Who have flown up through the leagues, obviously under the famous ownership of 2 Hollywood stars.
Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney.
Yeah, and they've gone from the National League to the Championship in 3 straight years, which is hard.
I mean, it's incredible. I know this is slightly getting off top. Well, it's not. I mean, Wrexham do have a very good FA Cup history, despite never having won it, because obviously they've been a lower league team. They have a few giant killings under their belt, a few good cup runs. It is genuinely impressive what those two have done at the club, regardless of how rich they are. It is not. You cannot throw money at a football club and get a club 3 promotions in a row. You simply can't. Must be an incredibly well-run football club. That's all I'm going to say on the matter.
Yeah, agreed.
Watch. Yeah. Welcome to Wrexham if you need any more information.
But I mean, it's just to round that off. What we're saying, everything we're talking about here is in that context. So it is the most amateurish of amateurish levels, the most amateur of amateurish levels, rather, that can play against the best of the best. You can get a European champion against like a university team, and because there are some university teams in the football pyramid. Yeah,
there are, and anyone, if you go far enough, if you get to the third round is the first round where the Premier League teams and the Championship teams, which is the league below the Premier League, enter. So if you get yourself to the third round and get yourself a lucky draw, you can end up and it happens a lot, a non-league team playing a Premier League team, and every so often the non-league team wins, and we'll get into that a bit in time, but I think most recently, Lincoln City knocked out Burnley in 2017, and before that, Luton knocked out. Who did they knock out? Norwich. They knocked out when Norwich were a Premier League team in 2013, and there was actually a player who played in both those games, and I forget who it is, but he played for Luton in the first one and was victorious. Then he played for Burnley in the second one.
Didn't Lincoln make the
quarterfinals?
They made the quarters. That's it. Yeah.
Andre Gray. I think it was Andre Gray.
Ah.
Yeah, so Andre Gray actually played for in both those games, once on the winning team, once on the losing team, which does make him the only person, I think, in history who's ever knocked out a Premier League team as a non-league player and been knocked out by a non-league team as a Premier League player.
That's fun.
There you go.
But so sorry, I sidetracked us slightly, but I thought it was important to contextualise why we love this tournament so much and why it captures the imagination so vividly.
Well, I should say about this, like, we obviously prepared a lot of notes in other episodes. I've not prepared a whole amount for this. I've only really prepared one thing, which I'll go into now because it sort of feeds on to the point we're at in history. But it's quite nice just to be able to ad-lib and talk about something we love, honestly.
It is very cool.
As much as I love learning about sports, as much as I've loved learning about horse racing and learning about ice hockey, this is, it's nice.
It is nice.
Just say that. So, do you want not a story? Yeah, it is a story actually. Do you want a story?
Yeah, I guess so.
Because it carries straight on from where we were. So, we're up to, obviously, professionalism's kicked in. I'll take you forward a few years. We're up to 1914-1915 season, and as anyone who knows anything about history will know, there's quite a seismic event going on in the world at that time.
Some Serbians weren't too enamoured by some Austrian guy.
Yeah, pretty much. A very good summary. You nailed it there. You'd be a historian, Ben. During the First World War, the landscape of British society obviously underwent huge transformations, but nowhere was this more visible, arguably, than the world of football. So the 1915 FA Cup final, which was between Sheffield United and Chelsea, which I believe Sheffield United won 3-0. I haven't got that written down, I'm just showing off again.
You got it
became
right.
Became known as the khaki final, due to the high number of uniformed soldiers in the stands. It was a poignant and symbolic moment, which neatly captured the end of peacetime football, with the Earl of Derby, who presented the trophy, calling on anyone not yet in uniform to play a sterner game for England, although it should be pointed out that was mostly drowned out by the fans cheering, but nevertheless made the papers. As the war intensified, obviously, more and more young men were being conscripted en masse to join the slaughter in the front lines, sadly. So men's professional football was suspended in 1915 at the end of the 1914-15 season. Football did continue, but it was very, very heavily enforced amateur. And in fact, there were some teams who came afoul of that after the war. Leeds City ended up being disqualified from the league for paying their players during this amateur period, and were reformed as Leeds United after that, who are quite famous.
Yeah, quite famous.
So many players obviously left the pitch for the trenches, and obviously many never returned. Over 2,000 professional footballers joined the military, and obviously many young men who were filling the terraces and local teams' rosters were also lost to the horrors of the Western Front, to the slaughter, the mindless, pointless slaughter. But let's not get into that right now.
Yeah, that's we have a tendency to be depressing with some of our stories. So let's not. I don't know if it's going to end happily, but let's not go to the trenches.
This is good. This is good, but it's hard to be positive about it. To be fair, you're going to be impressed. I find some positivity in the First World War, because it's very hard to be positive about that war.
Yes.
Nevertheless, with the male workforce decimated, literally, the people who stepped forward to cover were, of course, women. So women stepped forward to keep the wheels of the nation turning. They took up roles in factories, transportation, agriculture, munitions, previously, obviously, the exclusive domain of men. These munitions workers, particularly, colloquially known as munitionettes, brought the same level of energy and camaraderie to their downtime, just as the men did, and chose the sport they most wanted to unwind, and that was particularly football. For the same reasons football is so popular today, because it can be played with anyone with a ball and a couple of jumpers for goalposts. It is a very accessible sport. So just like with the birth of the men's game, the popularity and organisation of women's football exploded during these years, mainly in industrial centres across the country, mainly built around teams working out of these factories, particularly. I thought you were going to say something then.
No, I just think this is cool. I'm locked in. I'm just listening.
Yeah, it's great. So one of the most significant examples of this early organisation was the Munitionettes Cup, officially titled the Tyne and Wear and Tees Alfred Wood Munition Girls Cup, which was launched in August 1917 in northeast England, as you can imagine, by the name. The competition was solely contested by women in factory teams, obviously composed of female wool workers. The final of the inaugural tournament was played on the 18th of May 1918 and saw Blythe Spartans beat Bolcow Vaughan 5-0 with the legendary Bella Ray, who incidentally scored 133 goals in 30 games that season. She scored a hat-trick in the final.
That's all right, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a film about her, I think, or a series. Was it War Bella?
That's literally Roy of the Rovers kind of record.
It's ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous, and she's very, very well respected in her neck of the woods up in Blythe. I think Dan Burns talked about her quite a lot, because I think he's from Blythe. Yeah,
Blythe being near Newcastle.
Yes.
A massive footballing city.
Yeah, but one of the most impressive things about that final was it was played in front of 22,000 people in Middlesbrough, which was a pretty impressive turnout, which obviously spoke volumes about the enthusiasm for the women's game. The women's game actually managed to reach international levels before the war ended. On Boxing Day 1917, a representative team from England took on a side from Ireland in front of 20,000 spectators, which again is another very good turnout. I don't know what the score of that was, though. Sorry.
I'm sure it was played in really good faith. You know, the Irish and English probably getting on famously at that too.
In 1917, yes, nothing at all going on in the world then, which would keep them from a sense of friendship.
There's an irony there for anyone who doesn't understand. That's the same year as the Easter Risings, where the Irish revolted against English rule. Yeah,
not for the first time, not for the last time. Yeah,
no.
Among the many teams formed during this era, none was more famous or more influential than the Dick Kerr Ladies FC, who were based in Preston and founded in 1917. Consisting of female workers from Dick Kerr & Co. munitions factory, and the comma is in their name, so it's Dick, Kerr Ladies FC, which is fun. I don't know why I like that so much. They're from the Dick Kerr & Co. munitions factory, and quickly rose to prominence as arguably the most successful and well-known women's team of the 20th century. In their very first match, they had a crowd of 10,000 and raised £600 for charitable causes, which is the equivalent of £35,000 today, which ain't bad.
That isn't bad.
They existed for 48 years, and in that time they played 755 games, winning 682 of them, drawing 39 and losing just 34, which frankly is Harlem Globetrotter levels of dominance.
I was going to say, that makes the All Blacks look unsuccessful.
Yeah, good team. Their early matches often drew crowds in the tens of thousands, but famously one match against St Helens Ladies in December 1920 was played in front of 53,000 spectators at Goodison Park, which was an attendance figure for a women's club match that wouldn't be exceeded until Atletico Madrid played Barcelona in front of 60,000 spectators at the Metropolitano in 2019, which is ridiculous.
That is ridiculous.
And wouldn't be matched in England until Arsenal versus Wolfsburg at the Emirates in front of 60,000 in 2023, which is mad. 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So they beat a French 11 2-0 in 1920 in front of 25,000 spectators in Preston, which was actually a record attendance for Deepdale at the time. The team were known for their fast and skillful play, excellent teamwork. They wore black and white striped jerseys with a Union Jack on the breast, blue shorts, and completed their look with striped hats covering their hair, which they all hated, but was a necessary evil at the time, due to obviously the inherent conservatism. They also contributed most of the players to an England 11 that beat Scotland, a Scotland 11 22-0 that year as well.
Nice. Was it a 90-minute game?
I think it was 90 minutes. They changed some of the rules. They changed the pitch dimensions, made it slightly smaller, and they made the ball lighter, which actually is legitimate because the balls in those days were
heavy.
Weighed an absolute ton. So I can accept that.
Sorry, I was just trying to gauge how much of a butchering it was, but a butchering...
I don't think there's any way that can't be a butchering.
No,
I think if it was called off early, probably should have been. So anyway, they were initially quite well supported by governments and the press due to their fundraising and the backing of the private companies that formed them as well. They even found support from a very unlikely source when trying to play a pioneering floodlit night match in 1920 with repurposed anti-air spotlights as floodlights, and they had to seek permission from the Secretary of Defence at the time, whose name was Winston Churchill, and they got permission from him to do that.
There you go. That's weird. Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. So here, I'm sure you can imagine where this is going, but despite their popularity and early support, and women's football generally popularity and early support, it faced enormous and unsurprising institutional resistance. In 1921, at the height of their success, and at the time they were packing Division 1 stadiums to the rafters, the FA, the Football Association, ruled that sport was, quote-unquote, unsuitable for women, and accused them of keeping too much money raised in expenses and not donating enough to charity, essentially the same thing they got Leeds City for. Something, of course, keeping too much money and not in expenses and not donating enough to charity, something that the men at the FA can never be accused of course.
No, yeah, I was going to say the irony in that accusation.
Yeah. So by being excluded, by being kicked out, this banned them from using any grounds of any affiliated club and effectively pushed the women's game into the margins for half a century.
Jesus.
So Dick Hurt ladies carried on playing, as I said. They carried on touring, using smaller venues, but still attracting large crowds. They also toured internationally, which included, this is really cool, a tour to the United States in 1922, where they played 9 matches against men's teams composed of former professional players from the British Isles who had emigrated, and national level athletes. Well, they played 9 matches against men's teams composed of former professional players and national level athletes. They faced strong opposition, which included, as I said, former Football League players who had emigrated to the United States, and at least one male player who would go on to appear at the 1930 World Cup for the United States. Despite this, they held their own. 3 wins, 3 draws, 3 losses. American newspapers lauded them, with the Fall River Evening Herald calling their visit one of the biggest things in, apologies for this word, soccer, ever to have visited the United States. Yeah, we're in England now, I can use football. They praised their stamina, their combination play, and their speed. And Peter Renzulli, who was the goalkeeper for Patterson FC, remarked years later, "We were national champions, but we had a hell of a job beating them." Which is impressive.
That's very impressive. I was going to ask you if that had anything to do with the formation of the National Women's Soccer League in America, because that's obviously massive. But a quick Google suggests that's actually more recent than I thought.
I think so.
So I doubt it. It's 2012 that was set up, but I don't know if it had any predecessors, etc. But anyway, I digress. I just thought it would have been a nice link if it had been, but it's not.
I mean, I think women's football in England is slightly behind the curve, but it's not that behind the curve, unfortunately. The entire world was behind the curve including the United States. The United States were ahead of the curve, but it's all very much relative.
Mm.
Anyway, so in 1926, following a dispute with the club's ownership, the team was renamed Preston Ladies FC, but continued playing, so it's all the same team. They continued until 1965, including winning in 1954 against a team from Paris, 4-0, with future Liverpool manager and 1965 FA Cup winning manager Bill Shankly refereeing the match and presenting the winners with a trophy.
Bill
Which is
Shankly.
literally the only reason I mentioned that particular fact.
I was going to say, Jack being a Liverpool fan, anyone who's listening, Bill Shankly is a legendary Liverpool manager.
He is everything, Liverpool. Yeah. He is the man who built the club, as it is today.
Mm-hmm.
So the FA's ban on women's football lasted until 1971, and then following sustained pressure from players, campaigners, and fans, it was lifted. The same year saw the formation of the Women's Football Association Cup. That is the Women's Football Association Cup, as opposed to the Women's Football Association Cup. So it was a different organisation called the Women's Football Association, because God forbid the FA take them back onto their wing quite yet. So it was the Women's Football Association Cup, which was the forerunner to the modern Women's FA Cup, and is considered, when looking at stats and history, these are considered FA Cup games. The first FA Cup winner for women, therefore, was Southampton Women FC in 1971.
Nice.
So throughout the 80s and 90s, the women's game continued to grow, but very slowly. In 1992, the FA finally took full control of the women's game, taken over from the WFA, though this was merely a step towards full institutional recognition, that was still to come. The 90s themselves saw the breakout of the women's game globally for the first time, but as I mentioned, England were behind the curve on that. The first Women's World Cup was held in 1991. So, as everyone, I'm sure, well, anyone who knows anything about football will be no doubt aware, the 21st century has seen a very clear renaissance in women's football. The Women's Super League was launched in 2011, which brought professional status and broadcasting deals to the women's game. Attendances have surged as a result, and matches now regularly take place in the same major stadiums, once closed off to female players. The Women's FA Cup final is now held annually at Wembley Stadium, and after COVID caused the postponement of the 2021 FA Cup final, the match was eventually played, symbolically, on December the 5th, 2021, which was 100 years to the day since the FA banned women's football. Unfortunately, Ben, close your ears, Chelsea beat Arsenal that day in front of 41,000 spectators, and Chelsea again won in 2023, this time before a record-breaking 77,390 fans, which really cemented the cup status as one of the premier events in the global women's football calendar, or the global football calendar entirely. So yeah, there we go. From the factory fields of wartime England to the bright lights of Wembley, women's football.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I do like that story. It is cool.
It's a very cool story, particularly the way in which it emerged and then was obviously buried underground again, whilst the men were away, and just shows like that, without getting too poignant about the whole thing, it does show what opportunity does, because that is all World War One was for women's football, just an opportunity. It's not because they couldn't do it or they're not good at it, just they had a chance to play.
It seems like the most obvious thing in the world to say, but the single way to improve a sport more than anything else is to get a lot of people playing it. And obviously, there's an opportunity. First World War, there was a great demand for it. There was a great opportunity for these women to play it. They had downtime between their work in the factories to let off steam, and that's what they chose to do, because obviously it's a great game and it's an easy game to play. It's a very accessible game. And for the same reasons now, like I will say this right now, watch out for the England women's team in a few years' time, because England managed to win the European Championships in 2021, or 2022 when it actually was, I think, on the back of, this relatively slow curve, relatively slow uptake of the game. Still managed to get a very, very strong team together, a very, very well-run team, and won those Euros. As a result of that, as I mentioned several times, I'm a coach at a junior football club. Yeah. And
lots of girls have started playing. Yeah.
We've gone from having, I think, about 4 or 5 teams when I first joined, and the team maybe 40 girls playing at the club, to quadrupling that at least now. The uptake has been ridiculous. The ability of those players has gone through the roof. The younger age groups, particularly at our club, are extremely good. They are getting less and less distinguishable from the boys at their age, and a lot of them are playing both in girls' football and in mixed football. So I should point out to anyone who doesn't know, there is no such thing as boys' football in the United Kingdom, or in England, I should say. I don't know what it is in the other. I presume it's the same, but certainly in England under the FA, there's no such thing as boys' football. Yeah, it is all mixed football. So boys and girls can play together. Obviously, the mixed teams are mostly boys, and then the girls teams have the opportunity to play themselves. But there are a lot of very talented young girls playing in the mixed teams as well, and I've been lucky enough to coach them as well. So yeah.
So if anyone's come to this podcast thinking they're not going to have to listen to anyone championing women's football, you are horribly mistaken, and we won't apologise for it. There we are.
But if you're bothered about it, please feel free to go online and complain about it, because there's nothing you can do to benefit the women's game. If you understand anything about the internet and understand what engagement does, if you don't want anyone to watch that highlight that you're complaining about, I'd recommend you don't complain about it, mate. So from my point of view, you go ahead and complain about it. Honestly, if anyone thinks that women's football is going away in England, you are sorely mistaken. It has just begun. It is just getting started. And England are going to be very, very good in about 6 or 7 years' time. Just watch out.
And if any father out there has a prodigal daughter who is showing immense talent in football, can I recommend Arsenal Women's Football Club as a potential academy steeped in history? And since we're on the FA Cup, can I just point out that we've made 17 finals and the most successful club in women's FA Cup history with 14 wins. So
14 wins, eh? Same as the men.
Exactly. A nice little symmetry.
So our chance to slip in our first stat or one of our first stats of the day. Ben has dropped in it. The most successful team in both the men's FA Cup and the women's FA Cup, with 14 wins in both, is Arsenal.
Yeah. Men have made more finals. We made 21 finals. Won 14.
That means they've lost more, Ben.
It does, although we have a very, very good win rate in my lifetime. I think we've made 9 finals and won 8.
Yeah, I mean, even when Arsenal were struggling, sort of in the in-between period between Wenger and now, where you're good again. Even then, you're still winning FA Cups. Like Arsenal's ability to get to the FA Cup final and win it. I don't know what it is, whether it's just sort of like coincidence or whether it's just the attitude of the club. It's a club that takes the competition seriously, but there you are. 14 wins.
I'm sure that there is an element of fortune, but it definitely is something that the club associates itself with quite heavily, which is probably part of the reason why I find this tournament so endearing generally, because obviously my team has been successful in it, but yeah, it is. I'm no doubt that there's a dose of luck involved. Because it's all about draws. Yeah. That's the other thing. It's a random draw. So anybody doesn't. Why am I being magnanimous about that? It's because the FA Cup draw, there is no seeding system. So the 2 best teams in the tournament can technically draw each other at the earliest opportunity. And that often opens up a route to the final. I say often. It is not uncommon. It's not a frequent occurrence that a lower league side makes the final or an underdog makes the final, like Crystal Palace this year. But it is also not uncommon. It's not a freak event when it happens.
No.
So if you get a favourable draw, you can get to the final, or you can get to the latter stages without having to beat too many sides that you would say are conventionally challenging.
Yeah, I mean, you still have to beat them. Obviously, Crystal Palace have beaten plenty of good sides to get here.
Mm-hmm.
Not least in their semi-final when they knocked out Aston Villa, who are in the Champions League.
Not just knocked them out either.
4th in the Premier League.
Dispatched them.
Yeah. It took Arsenal. Funnily enough, one thing I mentioned before actually kind of helped contribute to Arsenal's first ever FA Cup win. If you recall, I said Leeds City got kicked out of the league in 1919. The Leeds City manager was a man called Herbert Chapman. And Herbert Chapman then went on to manage Huddersfield and won the FA Cup with them, and then went on to manage Arsenal, and in 1930 won the FA Cup with Arsenal's first FA Cup, and then promptly, unfortunately, passed away soon after that.
Yeah, there's a statue of a man built outside the Emirates Stadium. He is a much loved character.
I can go off. I mean, in terms of doing full episodes about people in football, you got Johan Cruyff, who I'd definitely do a full episode on. Marcel Bielsa, I'd definitely do a full episode on. Herbert Chapman, you could definitely do a full episode on. He revolutionized the game of football. His approach to football there's teams still effectively using his attacking system to this day, at least structurally, his attacking system. Tactically, the game has changed a lot, but
he's also the reason that Arsenal Underground Station is named Arsenal Underground Station, which is fun.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think he was the man responsible for that. I say responsible for it. I'm sure he wasn't the decision maker, but he was an influence in that coming about, I believe. Unless I've misunderstood my history, but I'm fairly sure that's right.
Well, fair enough.
So where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? Well, okay. Let's talk about the trophy, because I've literally got the note in front of me, and I'll forget to do it if I don't. So There's been 5 trophies in the history of the competition. The first one was in 1872. It was called the Little Tin Idol. It was created by Martin Hall & Co. of Sheffield for £20, and all the clubs that entered the competition that year had to contribute, I think, a guinea, whatever the heck a guinea is, towards that. So yeah, that's cool.
That is cool. What is a guinea? I'm going to have a look.
I want to say it's like £1 and a shilling or something. It's like just over £1, something like that. But anyway, not used today.
No.
So that was the trophy until 1895, when Aston Villa carelessly had it stolen from them from a shop window display in Birmingham, as you do. The thief was never caught, although in the 1950s a criminal claimed it was melted down for counterfeit coins, and Aston Villa were fined £25 for his disappearance, presuming it accrued £5 worth of value in the 20 years it was being used. So in 1895, a new trophy, a replacement trophy in the same design, was commissioned and was in use for 15 years. It was retired later, and it was later auctioned for £420,000 in 2005. There you go.
Whoa.
But in 1911, the classic design, the design that's used today, was designed and presented for the first time. Bradford jewellers Fattorini crafted the new, more robust trophy, which is the design it remains the same to today. It was first awarded to the winners of the 1911 tournament, appropriately Bradford City, with the trophy having been designed in Bradford. It served for 81 years and was retired in 1992, where it was very battered and bruised by them. It was valued at £1 million on the Antiques Roadshow, and some speculate it might originally have been a champagne cooler, given it's got decorative grapes on it, but it doesn't really matter. 1992, because it was so battered and bruised, they made a new one, which Liverpool captain Mark Wright was the first man to lift when they beat Sunderland in 92, 2-0.
Ian Rush and Michael Thomas having scored the goals.
The famous Michael Thomas.
Oh yeah, shouldn't have mentioned him, should I? That was an error. Yeah, he famously once scored against Liverpool to win the league title for Arsenal. But
with the last kick of the season.
Yeah.
We do digress. Fever pitch.
Yeah, neither of us remember that. We were alive for it, but we were very young.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2014, exactly the same trophy, but a bit more material, a bit heavier, 6.3 kilograms, designed to withstand public appearances. So yeah, the one trophy lasted like 80 years, and the second trophy only lasted about 30 years because it was touring so much, and so many fans touched it and dropped it, I imagine. And the new trophy is built a bit heavier to be able to be dropped by
children
Arsenal
and
captains.
the like. Yeah, Arsenal captain. That's true.
Yeah,
Oba.
Aubameyang dropped it. Yeah. But yeah, so it's only ever on loan to the teams that win it, and it has to be returned to the FA by March the 1st of the following year. So they get it for quite a fair bit of time, 10 months.
That's quite cool.
9 months.
I'm just going to throw a bone to our random enthusiasts out there. This time they're numismatists, I think. They're the people who collect coins.
I'll take your word for it.
I found out what a guinea is. A guinea was worth £1, 1 shilling, and equates to £1.05 in modern money. And so, yeah, the clubs didn't have to contribute very much. And it also shows just how far it's come when you were telling us about how much the cups were auctioned off for or valued at later on in the tournament's history.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Entrenched.
I will never I will never remember that word you just said, but shout out to you coin collectors.
A numismatist, if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
I can't imagine the Venn diagram of people who collect coins and like this podcast is very far apart. Probably a complete circle, I imagine.
Yes.
So yeah, shout out to you, our core supporters, probably. So
the trophy though, the trophy's it's an iconic trophy. It's the way it looks.
The way it's in parts as well. The way you got the base, you got the trophy, you got the lid. It all separates out and confuses Arsenal captains in that one occurrence.
If you
try to lift the whole thing up.
I mean, I guess it's true for most modern sports these days, but the silhouette of the FA Cup is unmistakable.
Yes, as all good trophies should be, as the Champions League trophy is, as the Premier League is. Silly crown on top.
But the FA Cup's logo is just a silhouette of its trophy. Or it is just the trophy or picture of it, depending on, your preferred broadcaster.
With a sponsorship slapped over the top.
Naturally.
Is it Emirates still?
I think it is, yeah. Actually,
they also sponsor Arsenal.
They do. Oh, conspiracy theory. There we go.
And Arsenal keep winning it. Weird that. I love a conspiracy theory.
Yeah. I'm just having a look who the sponsor is for us. The Emirates, yeah, it is.
I mean, I'll charge through a bit of the rest of the history. I think would be a good idea now. So first final at Wembley Stadium was in 1923. Bolton beat West Ham 2-0. One of the goals was very controversial. Officially, 126,000 attended.
Oh, mate, White Horse final.
The White Horse final. Actually, it was definitely over 200,000. It might even be as high as 300,000.
Can I add some flavour to that? The White Horse final. I don't know why I went down rabbit holes with this, because I think I love it for a couple of reasons.
It's horses again, yeah.
It's horses. It's post World War One. It's indicative of the love that the English public have for this tournament and this
horses
and this event generally. And so, yeah, as you were just saying, Jack, like official capacity was, I think, 125,000 back in the day at Wembley. Obviously, it was terraces, so make allowances for that. But the London Underground that day sold more than 241,000 tickets from stations within London to Wembley.
Says it all, doesn't it?
And that figure doesn't cover the people that travelled without a ticket, because obviously it would have been people bunking trains. It doesn't cover people who reached the stadium by road or on foot, and it doesn't include London buses, which were described as overwhelmed. On the day of the match, the gates opened at 11:30 a.m. Kickoff was obviously traditionally at 3 p.m. And by 1:45 they had to be shut, because the stadium was already full, and then people started gathering outside of it. So the fans rushed the gates at 2:15. Yeah. One of the spectators, Terry Hickey, who was interviewed, said later, "To put it mildly, the whole thing was a bloody shambles," which I think is a very English articulation of the situation. The roads around the stadium were so blocked that the Bolton players had to abandon their coach a mile from the stadium and walk through the crowds to the game. And the stadium authorities were considering calling it off, but they feared the consequences of cancelling the FA Cup final and the angry response that might provoke. And as you said, they think up to 300,000 people actually managed to gain entry. The terraces were overflowing to the point that the fans were on the pitch and the mounted police had to be brought in to clear the crowds. And this is where our protagonist, our hero, enters the fray. So, mounted police, as I say, and one of those police officers was a chap called PC George Scory. I think I'm pronouncing his name right.
Scory. Which is quite an appropriate name, actually.
It is, yeah. He wasn't supposed to be on duty that day, but he answered the call for emergency assistance, and he was on a horse named Billy. Now, Billy was a grey horse, not a white horse. I was going to say this.
The only fact I know about Billy is that he wasn't white, even though it's called the White Horse Final.
Yeah, he was grey.
The TV cameras couldn't pick him up properly, so
he came across as white on the TV screens, exactly, and all the photos that were taken of him. And so, basically, PC Scory didn't think, he literally is on record as saying he didn't think it was possible. He thought it was impossible to clear the crowds. But he describes the horse as like easing them back with his nose and tail until he got the goal line cleared. And essentially he thinks that the horse was, he gives the horse all the credit. He says it nothing really to do with him. The horse was just commanding attention, and the crowds were good-natured and seemed to understand what was required of them and what the horse was asking them to do, and he pushed them back. And whilst the pitch was being cleared, the event choir of St. Luke's sang
"Abide with Me."
Abide with me.
I didn't know if you were going to mention that. I had that charged up and ready to go.
So yeah, that's why it's called the White Horse Final. But I just think it's so cool. It prompted discussion in the House of Commons, and I think this is your fact, Jack, not mine. So I'm going to plagiarise off you. But I think it led to it being a ticketed only event. Is that right?
Yeah, I was going to say in the least surprising news ever. All ticket final from there. Yeah, I love this story, and I love how that's the first use of the first history of Abide With Me being sung at the FA Cup final. Apparently it was also sung by the West Ham fans as they sadly walked home after losing, but Abide With Me became a permanent staple from 1927, and I have a theory why it became a permanent staple from 1920, or why it was sung why it's remembered that it was sung in 1927, because the 1927 final had a lot of people in the stadium from a certain part of the United Kingdom, who are very well known for their singing, very well known for their male choirs. Cardiff City got to the FA Cup final that year, and if anyone knows anything about Wales, they love a sing-song, and they're very good at it. And Cardiff City played, and again, close your ears, Ben, they played Arsenal that day, and Cardiff City actually won the FA Cup, which is the last non-English team to win the FA Cup. There are still, basically anyone playing in the English football system enters the FA Cup, so Cardiff still do, Wrexham do, Swansea do, so on and so forth. Although it's been, Cardiff reached the final, I think 2008, they reached the final, lost to Portsmouth, I believe.
Yes.
But yeah, Cardiff were the last non-English team to win it, so they took the FA Cup back home with them to Wales, and left behind a legacy of Abide With Me being sung then on and then for the rest of the time. Which is a wonderful song.
That is, yeah. That's a cool origin story.
It is. It's very cool.
But yeah, sorry, I just really like the White Horse Final, just because I think it illustrates, left to our own devices, what the English public will do to make an FA Cup final.
Yeah, absolutely. And any other sporting event. Anyway, 1927 was also famous because it was the first FA Cup final broadcast by the British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC, obviously via the radio. And the Radio Times also gave a grid which allowed you to follow the ball around the pitch. So the commentator would say the ball is now in A1 or whatever, and you'd be able to follow it on the pitch. So completely pointless, but that was interesting.
Innovative, at least.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll fast forward ahead now. I'll spin through some of the key finals, the key things that happened. All the key things that happened during the tournaments. 1946 was the first post-World War II FA Cup, most notable for some ties being played over two legs, which has never happened before. Derby County won the final, but it was most notable for a disaster which happened in Bolton in the sixth round, which is the Burnden Park disaster, in which quite a lot of fans lost their lives. Not unfortunately the last disaster to hit the FA Cup, which we'll come to later.
It's also a pretty eerie precursor, because it's similar in nature.
Yeah. So playing in that game was one Stanley Matthews. I think it was Bolton against Stoke, I want to say, at that point.
Correct.
I don't think Matthews had joined Blackpool yet. But anyway, Stanley Matthews in 1953 was the most famous English footballer ever at that point. He's still one of the most famous English footballers to this day. His incredible longevity is most notable. He was the first ever winner of the Ballon d'Or trophy, and he won it in 1956. You think that's boss? He won it in 1956 at the age of 41 years old.
Whoa!
Which was 9 years before he retired. He carried on playing until 1965. He played for England until 1957, but in 1953 he'd never won any trophy. He'd played for Stoke, his boyhood club. He'd won Division 2 with them, I should say. He'd never won a Division 1 trophy or an FA Cup trophy or anything like that. He won Division 2 with them in 1933. He would later win Division 2 with them again in 1963, which is fairly incredible. But in 1953, Blackpool, his team at the time, he was at Blackpool in between a couple of spells at Stoke. They were playing Bolton in the final, and they found themselves 3-1 down with not too long left on the clock. He was playing with a man named Stan Mortensen, who's possibly the most unfortunate man in FA Cup final history, because this final became known as the Matthews final after Blackpool came back from 3-1 down, pulled a goal back through Mortensen, got an equaliser through Mortensen, which was his hat-trick goal because he scored the first goal as well. That's a Stan Mortensen hat-trick. And then in the 92nd minute of the game, having equalised in the 89th, Stanley Matthews beat a couple of players, got to the byline, pulled the ball back across to where he thought Stan Mortensen would be. And apparently Matthews later said for the first time all bloody season he wasn't stood there. Obviously Stanley Matthews would never have said bloody because he was a lovely man. But Stan Mortensen wasn't there, but a man named Bill Perry was. And Bill Perry swept it in for a 4-3 victory in what is generally regarded as the greatest FA Cup final of all time, and definitely the greatest FA Cup final comeback of all time. So it's called the Matthews final, basically because of the reverence the British public have for Stanley Matthews. It really should be called, if not the Mortensen final, then the two Stans final, something like that, because Stan Mortensen and Stanley Matthews were both instrumental to winning that. So yes, Stan Mortensen's obviously very well remembered. He's the only man ever to have scored a hat-trick in an FA Cup final, and everyone remembers Stanley Matthews. Because I think you can probably begrudge that, because Stanley Matthews was an absolute legend.
Yeah, and he's still got his FA Cup medal, Stan Mortensen, so yeah.
Yes. Yeah, legend of the game himself. So the 1950s were notable for pretty much one other thing.
We both like this story a lot. I know where you're going with this.
So, well, in general terms, it's notable for one other thing, which was injuries. There were no substitutes at this point. There was no substitutes until 1967.
Mm-hmm.
But let's go through this. 1952, Arsenal's Wally Barnes got split cartilage. 1953, Eric Bell was injured during that final I just mentioned. 1955, Jimmy Meadows broke his leg. 1957, Ray Wood of Man United got clattered and ended up finishing out limping on the wing. 1959, Roy Dwight broke his leg playing for Luton. Roy Dwight, funnily enough, is actually Elton John's cousin, what he's most famous for. 1960s, it carried on. Dave Whelan broke his leg playing for Blackburn. Do you recognise the name Dave Whelan?
Yeah, I do, but I don't know why.
He was the chairman of Wigan when they won the FA Cup in 2013.
That's it.
So that was a brilliant final. He beat Man City.
Now his nephew owns it or something. Is that right?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
1961, Len Chalmers as well. And then finally, in the mid-60s, they finally allowed substitutes in football. You might have noticed there was 1 year and one name I left off there, Ben.
Yeah.
Because a man that deserves a mention. 1956.
Well, he's going to make like all of these other guys look like they basically should have played on.
For various reasons. So, Bert Trautmann was born in Bremen in 1923. He joined the Luftwaffe early in the Second War. They later became a paratrooper. He was initially serving in Poland and fought on the Eastern Front. He earned 5 medals, including an Iron Cross, which is a very high award for valour in the German army. Later in the war, he ended up on the Western Front, where he was captured by the British as the war drew to a close. One of only 90 of his original 1,000-man regiment to survive the war, he was transferred to a prison of war camp in Ashton in Makefield, Lancashire. After the war, he refused an offer of repatriation, instead deciding to start his life in Lancashire, to continue his life living in Lancashire, where he got married and started playing in goal for a local football team who were St Helens Town. He was so good that in 1949, a much bigger team, Manchester City, back when they were still loved and respected by all, as opposed to today.
Yeah, basically should say pre 2006, 7-ish, before they got bought out by a Thai billionaire, then were sold to their current owners. They were very much like loved as a working class team of the people, and there's an ongoing joke about everyone in Manchester supporting Manchester City and not Manchester United, despite Manchester United's success. So that's yes.
Also, no, obviously there's a lot of I don't want to criticise Manchester City wholeheartedly. A lot of their fans have been there, and they have been through some ups and downs. They've
some
been down
major
to
downs.
What was the second division, seeing themselves win a playoff game to get themselves back up. So the second division is what is now League One, the third tier of English football. You can 12 years later winning the title. I bet the high tasted sweeter for the low that preceded it. Anyway, Bert Trautmann played in his first FA Cup final in 1955 against Newcastle United and came out on the losing side, the wrong side of a 3-1 deficit. But Manchester City got back there in 1956 and they were playing Birmingham City in that game. So the game started well for Manchester City. They took the lead in the 3rd minute before Birmingham equalised in the 15th minute. Manchester City restored their lead. So with 17 minutes remaining, Bert Trautmann dived at the feet of a Birmingham striker to win the ball, but the striker's knee hit him in the back of the neck with a forceful blow. Trautmann was immediately knocked unconscious, and the referee understandably stopped play immediately. The trainer came out to the pitch, but even in the 1950s,
I'm laughing because stopping play is as far as this story goes for medical attention and care for this guy.
There was no substitutes. No substitutes, and
I get
ordinarily,
that, but he got sparked, and they were just yeah. Sorry.
If it was an outfield player who got injured, they'd stick him on the wing.
Yeah,
but you can't do that with a goalkeeper.
Yeah,
so with no substitutes permitted at this point. They'd either have to see out the game with 10 men and a outfield player in goal. In fact, their captain Roy Paul advised Trautmann to go off and wanted to put a player called Roy Little in goal instead. But Trautmann, being hard as nails, as he obviously was, insisted on carry on playing. So he played out the remaining minutes in great pain, with Manchester City defending a lead at this point as well. Mm-hmm. Basically, the City defenders just try to hoof it as far as they can whenever it was possible. But even so, Trautmann was still called upon to make a couple of further saves, the second of which caused him to recoil in agony due to another collision.
Why was this so impressive, Jack? Because everyone's probably wondering, why are you banging on about this? Because this guy only got knocked out, and I've heard about people breaking their legs.
So, it turned out after the game, Bert Trautmann did in fact go to the doctors, which is good. And after the game, it turned out that he had broken a bone in his neck, and that had it been a little bit worse, there's nothing the trainer could have done in that situation, shall we say. It was close. It was a close run thing to, something bad or something very bad happening, shall we say. But nevertheless, he got through the game. Manchester City won the FA Cup, and when he went up to collect his winners' medal, the Duke of Edinburgh commented that his neck looked quite crooked. So there you go. If even Phil notices, you know it must be bad.
Broken his neck and still played on.
Ridiculous.
Absolutely.
I love that story.
Wild.
Yeah,
and cool for a number of reasons. Because A, he won. B, it was a different time. And C, his backstory. And it's just also astonishing, obviously.
And also, despite that run of injuries, and despite this specific injury obviously making very big headlines, it still took the FA over 10 years to allow substitutes in the FA Cup final.
It shows how archaic it was. It's not hard to...
So conservative.
Yeah, it's not hard to see why the women weren't allowed to play for another 30 years or something.
Just traditions, man. Traditions trump everything.
Yeah.
Just use some common sense. I mean, you can... Obviously, people will argue and say, you can now get... For those who don't know, you now get to name... I think you get to name 12 substitutes, and you can make 5 during the game. And, even when it became allowed to have substitutes in the mid to late 60s, it was still only one substitute. You just had one spare player on the bench. It's very different now, but you can make arguments both ways with that. Obviously, the quality of the game is improved as a result because players can run harder and faster, knowing that they're only going to be on the pitch for 65 minutes. So, make of that what you will.
Yeah, no, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, but the FA Cup's full of remarkable stories. That's why it's so damn cool.
Yeah, I don't want to get into certain things too much because we're going to do so many FA Cup episodes in the future, and we're going to be able to dive in depth. I should point out to everyone as well, obviously when we redo events, we're not going to go back through the history as well. It's just going to be straight onto the stories.
Yeah, we'll just signpost people back to the history if they want to hear about it.
Exactly. Yeah. So I would say the heyday of the FA Cup, the 1970s and the 1980s, where some legendary finals, amazing things happened. First final to go to a replay was 1970, where Chelsea beat Leeds 2-1 after extra time, after a 2-2 draw at Wembley, which my dad was at, I think. I think my dad said he was at that one. But he wasn't at the replay, which is probably for the best, because he's a Leeds fan.
Mm-hmm. So is your brother.
So is my brother, yeah. I'm the dark sheep. I was born in Liverpool, just to defend myself. So it was 1970 was also the first year with a very short-lived, until 1974, third-place playoff in the FA Cup, which I did not know until today. Yeah. So 1972 was the centenary FA Cup final, and just to throw my dad and brother a bone, Leeds won that one, beating Arsenal 1-0 with an Alan Clark diving header, I think I mentioned before. Some of the best FA Cup final winning goals of all time have been headers. If you think about Wimbledon in 1988, Laurie Sanchez's header, obviously Wigan
88 or
2013. 88. That was 89. Liverpool won it after Hillsborough. Yeah, 2013. It was what's the ginger lad called? He scored the winner for Wigan.
Ben Watson.
Ben Watson, yeah, that's the one.
Leaping like a salmon. I remember wanting Wigan to win that final so much as a neutral.
I was so ill that day. I had a really bad stomach bug, and I basically couldn't stand up without like having to run to the toilet to throw up, which I'm sure everyone appreciate that imagery.
Until you saw Ben Watson's header, is that what you were going to say?
I got to the point where I was like 80th minute. I was like, how has this game got to the 80th minute? But I have now just come out of it. I feel great now. And then Ben Watson scored that. It was fantastic. And I was like punching the ceiling, like cheering and celebrating. And then 5 minutes after full time, I was back in the toilet again.
Yeah, like that. Just since we mentioned that Wigan one, they won that cup the same year that they were relegated. And then the following year, they actually made the semi-finals again. And en route to the semi-finals, where yours truly knocked them out on pens before beating Hull in the final, for what it's worth, they played City again en route in the quarters and pulled their pants at the Etihad. So they beat them 2 years in a row.
You'll have to see it.
Yeah. That's what this trophy's
City
all
fans
about.
must hate us.
Yeah, we're just
probably going to win the cup
City
on Saturday. So.
Yeah.
Although, who knows? But anyway, the 1970s. The year later, just to bite back at my dad and brother, was one of the greatest FA Cup final shocks of all time, where lowly Sunderland of Division 2 played all-conquering Leeds at this time, one of the best teams in the world, and beat them 1-0 in one of the greatest final shocks. Ian Porterfield scoring the winner, and Jimmy Montgomery, the real hero, in Sunderland's goal, keeping out the legendary Peter Lorimer with one of the greatest double saves of all time, which, if you haven't seen it, watch it. It's incredible. Yeah.
But that's
more shocks.
Again, I just want to add a little bit of context for people. Leeds were as dominant in the 70s as Liverpool were in the 80s, or Man United were in the 90s. Well, maybe not that. They were not as dominant. Yeah, but
I think
they won a lot of league titles.
All Leeds fans would accept that Leeds should have won more than they did. Leeds were better than the titles they ended up winning, and they still won.
Yeah. What I mean is that they were the
one League Cup.
They were the team of that decade.
Cup. Maybe 2 UEFA Cups.
They were the
team of the decade.
They were the team of the decade. The way Liverpool were the 80s, United were the 90s, and City are now. Maybe not as successful, but they were the
and also
the
a deeply unpleasant team to play as well.
Yeah. And if anybody's
you played them.
Yeah, if anybody wants a sort of a comedic spin on it, just watch the Damned United and Brian Clough's view of Leeds United and his experience where he temporarily took over there.
Yes, that went down well. It was the first. There was actually 3 Division 2 teams who won the FA Cup in the 70s and one in 1980. 2 in the 70s, one in 1980. Because 1976 Southampton beat Manchester United 1-0, and then 1980 West Ham beat Arsenal 1-0.
They did. You're hell bent on just talking about the 7 cup finals we lost, not the 14 that we won.
Arsenal, of course, being the holders of the competition at the time, having won another one of the greatest FA Cup finals of all time, where having been 2-0 up late in the game, Arsenal were 2-0 up late in the game, managed to concede 2 late goals, and just as Manchester United thought they had the game in the bag and were going to score a third and win it, Arsenal went straight up at the other end, and Alan Sunderland, of course, scored the winner.
Back post. Big perm as well on Alan Sunderland.
So 1981 was a great final too. Spurs winning it with Ricky Vila's wonder goal, which I'm sure you won't want me to talk about that much.
Vomit-inducing.
Great finals in the 70s and 80s. Liverpool beating Everton a couple of times. The second of which, 1989, won 3-2 against Everton in that final. That came a few weeks after the singular darkest day in Liverpool Football Club's history, and in definitely the FA Cup's history as well, and in English football's history, and in maybe, I wouldn't want to say all the football's history. There's been quite a lot of dark days around the world, but the Hillsborough disaster, which I'm not going to talk about too much today because I want to do it in depth sometime, and it's not the introductory episode to the FA Cup is not the time to do it. But obviously, as a Liverpool fan,
it would be remiss not to mention it, though. It is,
yeah.
So
97 Liverpool fans lost their life, 95 on the day, a 96th a little while later, and then a 97th died of injuries caused by the accident not too long ago now. So yeah, massive tragedy. The cover up and the attitude of the newspapers, the press, the government at the time. I'll save it for another day, but yeah, strong views on that one.
A lot went wrong accidentally, and then a lot went wrong deliberately afterwards.
Yes. So a lot went wrong because of incompetence, and then a lot went wrong because of malice after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things were said that shouldn't have been said, and a lot of things were done that shouldn't have been done. A lot of time and a lot of money was wasted. A lot of opportunity to be honest, even to get to the point where it happened, there was just bad political decisions made. But as I said, I'll come to that in the future.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we can drill into.
Demonisation of an entire group of people, essentially, was a factor in it. Football fans, generally.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, from there, obviously we're getting more recent. The last final replay, as we said, Arsenal beat Sheffield Wednesday, the first club to win the FA Cup and the League Cup in the same season. So the year 2000 saw the singular worst thing that I can say a club has done in FA Cup history, when Manchester United withdrew from the competition to instead play in the FIFA Club World Championship in Brazil. Fortunately, they got it handed to them when they were there. They didn't even get out of their group. But as a result of that, one of the teams that lost in round 2 was redrawn back into the competition as a lucky loser. And the lucky loser on that day was Darlington.
Yeah, that's fun.
That's a fun fact.
Who once tried to sign Tino Espria.
Yes, they did. And series of unfortunate events that eventually led to them going bust, I believe.
Yeah, they went bust, yeah. But, United,
You just don't do that.
You don't do that. Yeah, exactly.
You don't do that. And if you do that, make sure you go and win the bloody competition you've, dropped out of it for.
At least have the decency to go bring home the tin pot 2-bit rubbish trophy that you decided
decided wasn't important enough for your efforts.
Yeah,
even to send your youth team to.
Yeah. I think, nah, I'm not having that. I'm not having that at all.
And neither should you. No excuse whatsoever.
No one's done it before or since, which probably tells you the sort of backlash that it generated.
Yeah, it should have been banned for. As much as I hate Manchester City now, God, my hatred of Manchester United at that time
runs deeper.
My dad never got me to be a Leeds fan, although I do love Leeds United. He never quite got me to a Leeds fan, but my God, did he get me to hate Manchester United. That man did a sterling job at that.
You can see our biases coming to the fore here. It's very difficult to remain objective when it comes to football. But yeah, that regardless of your affiliations, I think withdrawing from the FA Cup is sacrilege, basically, when it comes to English footballing. Tradition, culture, heritage, morality. I don't know what else to say about it, really. You
just don't do it.
It's despicable behaviour.
Yeah. Anyway,
and I would say the same about my own club, but thankfully my club are decent and have never done something so abhorrent.
No, they haven't. Neither is mine. And speaking of mine, 2001 till 2006, Wembley was redeveloped, and the FA Cup final was played outside of England at the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff, which is a lovely stadium, to be fair. The last of those finals was 2006, which is known as the Gerrard final, after Steven Gerrard scored twice, including a 35-yard screamer to equalise in the last minute, and send me into quite large raptures.
What a goal.
And then Liverpool ended up winning on penalties there. So 2007 was the first final at the new Wembley, which Chelsea won. And from 2008, in order to pay for the new Wembley, all semi-finals have been played at Wembley, which I hate, and you probably hate too.
Yes.
Cool. So previous to that, semi-finals were always played at a neutral venue, but it was always somewhere in between the two grounds. So if it was, I don't know, Aston Villa versus Newcastle, they played at Old Trafford. If it was Arsenal versus Manchester United, they play at Villa Park, something like that.
Yeah.
It would be Stamford Bridge, Villa Park, or Old Trafford, generally speaking. I think sometimes Hillsborough as well, of course. Yeah. I think the City Ground in Nottingham a few times, but yeah. So I hate that.
It's a money thing, isn't it? And
yes,
yeah. Like all these things in modern day sport, the money talks. And yeah, it's a shame because the showpiece event is supposed to be at Wembley, but now you get to go because there's more tickets to sell, more corporate hospitality to sell. But yeah, it's a shame.
It is. And anyway, that's us pretty much up to the modern day. Obviously, as we said, Manchester City versus Crystal Palace this weekend, and the neutrals like us will probably be supporting Palace.
We will definitely be supporting Palace. Just before, because I suspect we're wrapping up shortly.
I think so, yeah.
But before we go, do you have a favourite FA Cup final, Jack?
Do I have a favourite?
A personal favourite.
I do, but it's going to make me sound like a nerd. We used to have an old videotape of the 1953 FA Cup final, and I used to watch it, which was the Matthews final. I used to watch it, and it's wonderful. I can't get past this. Stanley Matthews is my favourite footballer of all time. He's just if you're going to learn about one footballer and have your opinions of footballers turned on his head as to how a man could be so humble, so beloved, and so lovely, and play for so long and be so fit at a time when this was men who had steak and eggs for breakfast and a half-time cigarette. That wasn't him. He was fit as a fiddle. But yeah. 1953 would probably be my
I wasn't expecting that. I thought you were going to pick a Liverpool one, which shows anyone who's listened and stuck with us to the end of this episode just quite how much you actually love this game and this sport above your allegiances.
The best Liverpool one is the Gerrard final. It's which is obviously I love that goal and it was a great moment for me. Liverpool should have won that game. Liverpool were the better team in that game. West Ham. I mean, if I was a neutral, I'd be gutted about that because West Ham were the plucky underdogs at the time, and Paul Konchesky, scoring for his hometown club to give them the lead and everything like that. But yeah, it's not as romantic as 1953 as it's it. It's everything.
I reckon I could. All three of mine are Arsenal wins naturally.
Yeah.
I think I could give you three though. Like for different reasons.
I think I know what one of them's going to be.
Go ahead.
It's only Ray Parlour.
Of course it is. It's only Ray Parlour. Signed 2002. FA Cup final beat Chelsea 2-0. Freddie Ljungberg scored a wonderful goal, wonderful solo goal. And then Ray Parlour, who is a bit of a cult hero at Arsenal and a stalwart in midfield, guy from Romford. Basically, they used to have a thing called fan
zone,
yeah, and for the final they had celebrities, special guests or whatever, and Tim Lovejoy was as a Chelsea fan was commentating, and as Ray Parlour picked up the ball he said, "Oh, it's only Ray Parlour," before Ray Parlour curled in a 30-yard beauty into the top corner. So that
might be over exaggerating on the yardage, but that was a beauty.
I think it was 50, maybe 60 yards.
Over a kick, yeah.
Yeah. A bicycle kick from the halfway line. No, it was. But that was unreal. But I think that my favourite one is probably the victory over Hull in 2014, just because we hadn't won for quite a while, nearly 10 years. We hadn't had a trophy. We came from 2-0 down, Aaron Ramsey with the winner. And then the most comfortable FA Cup final I've ever enjoyed was when Arsenal beat Villa 4-0, because that was nice and easy.
It was before Villa were good, though.
It was before Villa were good, but I've never watched a game of such magnitude in such a relaxed state. Although you probably don't recall it like that, because I'm sure even in like the 90th minute I was like, if we concede now, even though we were 4-0
that
up.
sounds like you.
But yeah, anyway, there we are. The romance of the cup, it'll never die, and those people that say that it's lost its magic don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah, and I think we should end just by talking about the greatest thing about the FA Cup, just because I don't think we've given it enough emphasis, is giant killings. So anyone who's not heard that phrase before, this is when a lower league team knocks out a higher team. Even better when it's a non-league team knocking out a Premier League team, like we mentioned. Lincoln City did, and Luton Town did within the last sort of 12 years or so. But just to give a shout out to sort of the great ones in the past. Hereford United knocking out Newcastle in the 70s. Ronnie Radford?
Mm-hmm.
That was a 30-yarder. Flew in to win that game. Sutton United knocked out Coventry City as a non-league team in 1989 on a horrible pitch with a header, and then I think Coventry hit the bar and withdrew. That Sutton's goal lived a charmed life, and pitch invasion at the end. You love to see it. And then Chesterfield, 1997, reaching the semi-finals, going all the way, playing Middlesbrough in the semi-finals, getting a last-minute equaliser to force a replay in the semi-final, but unfortunately lost in that replay. But yeah, nice. Good times.
Cool. So where can people watch it?
If you're in England, the BBC. Always the BBC.
And ITV. It's on both free-to-air now.
Who cares? It's always the BBC.
It's always the BBC. If you're in America, I think you will find it on ESPN. I think in some jurisdictions it's on Setanta, which I didn't even know still existed.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Neither did I.
I think that's right. New Zealand, you will find it on Sky. Australia, apparently it's Optus.
Cool.
Just trying to see if I can find Ireland for anybody that's interested in Ireland.
Do they know about BBC signal?
I'm not sure. Can't find Ireland, which is annoying. But I'm sure the people in Ireland who like football, who may or may not listen to this, will be able to find the FA Cup final if they want to watch it.
I'm pretty sure, yes. Anyway.
But yeah, so there we are. And so that only leaves us to preview where we're going next week.
Yes, which I'm superbly excited about because I recorded the intro to this about 6 weeks ago. I'm so excited about it. So next week, it's primarily the crown in the jewel of the Formula One calendar to finally give us a chance to talk about Formula One. It's the Monaco Grand Prix. Mm-hmm. But also, because I love overstretching us and doing more sports than we can possibly handle in one episode, we will also be passing a bit of comment on the other events in the Triple Crown of Motorsport, which are the Indy 500 and the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Mm-hmm. Talking about the drivers who've attempted all three, the one who succeeded, and the ones who have got so close, as well as focusing mainly on Monaco, which, say what you want about the race, it's still a hell of an event.
Yeah, and to end on a deliberate and sickly pun, you'll be driving that episode, I think. Wee.
I can't wait. I'm very excited.
So yeah, if you're interested in that, join us then. But until next week, goodbye, Jack.
Goodbye, Ben. See you later.
See you later.
Yet again, thank you for listening to the Sporting Almanac podcast. Your support really means the world to us. If you enjoyed it, give us a like, a subscribe, or a rating wherever you get your podcast from. But most importantly, as ever, please tell your friends. There's no better advertising than word of mouth. It costs nothing and it really does make a difference. Our theme tune is Oh Yeah by Harmonia Productions. You can find us on Blue Sky at The Sporting Almanac, or drop us an email at sportingalmanacpodcast@gmail.com. We'll see you next week on the streets of Monte Carlo, but until then, stay curious. Sport is nothing without the stories that make it. Goodbye.